These are the five things that we're going to try to address today, and hopefully we'll be able to do that for you. There are some topics that we probably won't be covering because they are outside the scope of this session. Topics that you will probably need to check with your department and college, things like specific technology, like if you need a microphone or if there will be projectors in the room or cameras. Those are things that your individual department and college in their instructional design or technology team will probably be better able to talk to you about. And we also won't be covering specific college department protocol for teaching in the fall of 2020, such as delivery format, face-to-face, remote, online. I understand that Dr. Lupiani sent all faculty an email regarding if you wanted to teach online because you did not want to teach in person. So I encourage you to kind of revisit that there. The format of the session will be in general about 30 minutes of set questions in a round robin format for our panelists. And then we've set aside about 15 to 20 minutes towards the end for you as participants to ask questions. We do have moderators who will be moderating the chat. So if a question arises that's kind of very related to a panelist answer or reply, then we can definitely kind of try to answer that.
Hi, my name is Sharon Gursky. I'm a professor in the Department of Anthropology. I've been at Texas A&M now for approximately 20 years, and I've been doing online teaching for about 5 years. And that includes not just teaching, larger sections of 100, but also I have had the ability to teach some life science labs, some biological anthropology labs, very bone-based studies, and so on. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gursky, and I am very excited to know that you have a little little animal named after you. That was pretty cool. So, Dr. Gariazzo, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. Good morning. I'm Mariana Gariazzo. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Performance Studies, and I teach an online course that is fully delivered online. It's an introduction to the field of performance studies, core curriculum course that enrolls about 1,000 students each semester. So I have a bit of experience on online design and moderation of large courses. And I'm thrilled to be here this morning to share my expertise.
Thank you, Dr. Gariazzo. Now, Dr. Sparks.
Hi, I'm Dave Sparks. I'm a professor of geology and geophysics. I've been teaching here for 21 years. I'm probably the newest here at this. I just started developing an online course last year that I've been doing, and so I've been doing an asynchronous problem-based course, which has been small so far, but my intention is that it will ramp up to larger numbers.
So as you can tell, our panelists come from a wide variety of backgrounds, online teaching experience, context, and disciplines. So we do have a set number of questions that I do want our panelists to kind of address, and I'll paste these in the chat too. So this is the first question that we're going to pose to our panelists. And if you do have other questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. But this is the first question that we're going to ask our panelists to kind of address. So what is the most important thing to consider when teaching online? What is the most important advice you can give to peers who are starting to teach online? And what do you wish you had known before?
Good. Do I start or somebody else volunteers? I'll go ahead then. I think one of the most important things for me is creating a community of learning. And we can do that by the way that students feel the ability to interact with each other and interact with the instructor. I want to emphasize that developing a sense of belonging, it's paramount, it's everything. So when I communicate with my students, I watch the tone and the way that I make students feel included in the course. The idea that we are all figuring this out together. we are all on the same ship and we are sailing abroad. We are sailing together. That is critical for students to feel included, to feel active participants of this learning community, and to feel that it is my priority, their success, so that I want them to have a great experience. I want to facilitate their learning, and I want them to do very, very well in the course. And one more thing that I will add, a little, a little tip, is that consistency is very important. By consistency, I mean that my way of communicating with the students and the way in which I deliver the content in the course needs to be consistent throughout the semester. So, for instance, when I communicate with them, I announce this week in this such module, we're going to be talking about these topics. I explain very briefly what that is about. I also let them know why that topic excites me, why I am so happy to share that with them. And then, well, I hope that you enjoy the content. Just let me know your comments. That it is important, and as well as making sure that you can remind the students with visual aids, colorful tables and things like that, what is due every week. And then the other point is making sure that your content is really well organized in modules. That is very important. And I like assigning these modules weekly, so that every week we have a different module, and that seems to be a steady, a consistent rule for the class. So ritualize the way that we behave in the class for the students, for the instructor, and be predictable in your communication and delivery.
Thank you very much, Mariana. That was very, very detailed. Dave or Sharon, do you have any thoughts that you would like to share?
Sure, I'll go if that's okay.
Sure.
I think the most important, to me, the most important thing that I have learned while devising these classes is structure. And Mariana touched on this when she was talking about the modules. Having a very detailed structure to the class is paramount for its success. The other thing that I would recommend is creativity. The success of your class and your ability to teach your students the things that you want in this new medium is tied to your own ingenuity. If you can be creative in figuring out new ways to teach this information, you will be successful with this class. If you just want to teach it the way you've always taught it for the last 20 years, it's not going to be successful. Figuring out new ways to do it is the only way to do an online class. When I first started, I thought I would just be recording my lectures and they'd learn it like that. Well, students procrastinate. They're going to wait till the last minute. They're going to get bored sitting at their computers. They're not going to do it like that. Being creative and recognizing that while the students need to learn differently now, we need to find new ways to teach them. And those are very important things that I have since learned since starting teaching. Dr. Sparks, it's all yours.
Thanks. I would say one of the things that I learned was actually less from teaching my course than last semester. I was sitting in on a graduate course. It was a small course that met all Friday afternoon. And of course, in March, we went online. And so that course became essentially, here are the slides so it was sort of a disembodied voice talking about slides for 3 hours on a Friday afternoon. And it's really hard to get through that. So from a student's perspective, you could see how hard that was. And you're just looking at a sea of black boxes instead of faces. So it feels like they're very disengaged. And then every so often, a student would ask a question and you realize, oh, they're really following this and going ahead. But their engagement, while some of them certainly are not engaged, their engagement doesn't come across. And I think the lesson to take from that is that it's harder for your engagement to come across too. So I find that when I'm doing, I use mostly pre-recorded lectures, but I find like I have to really kind of think about, okay, I'm going to take my level up a couple of notches in my enthusiasm level, because I'm not walking back and forth in front of them. I'm not there pointing at them and talking to them. So when I shoot a video, everything I do is based on equations and plots and stuff. So of course I have slides up most of the time, but I will edit in me coming in to just sort of use my hands to show something or just to tell a joke or something like that, because I feel like every few minutes you need that personal connection. Otherwise you don't seem engaged to them, even if you are. So even if you've been talking the whole time. So it's just a medium that you really kind of have to overdo it a little bit in order to come across.
Thank you, everyone. Those were really, really good general thoughts and overviews, but I've noticed the chat has some questions on some specifics. So I'm going to go ahead and post our second question here, and that will deal with more of the specific kind of engagement strategies that you use. So the second question is, what practices have been most effective for facilitating student learning in this online environment? How do you get students to participate?
Well, I'm going to start on that. I think participation can be divided in different things. So you can use the board discussions for students to engage on topics and comments that are related to the material, the content that you presented that week. And so creating that interaction is very important in discussions. It's also important to include materials that are delivered in different ways. So I saw in the chat that someone was asking for any examples of new ways. So I like to also elaborate a little bit on that. So if you teach a lecture face-to-face that is 50 minutes, in which you are talking for about 40 minutes, and then students will question at the end or throughout your lecture, that format will not be very effective in an online, fully developed online course. So in order to make it new or to make it more, to retain the student attention, you may want to break out that 40-minute lecture into the most concise way you possibly can. By that I mean, you will create about 3 to 5 different videos, each of which will be about 3 to 5 minutes long, very, very concise. I try to emphasize being short in the way that I deliver my words. I even create a script, and sometimes I have to scratch some redundancy in my script to make sure that I can teach the most in the shortest amount of time. And I'm saying that because I evaluate on YouTube how many minutes I retain my audience, my students. And in a video of 3 minutes, 2 minutes is about 2 minutes is what they watch, and then the rest they just go and I don't know what they do, but and then besides the videos, I also try to deliver in other ways the content. So I create text within my module, illustrated with pictures. So there's something visual that is appealing for them to be drawn to the material. I have assignments, creative assignments, reflective assignments, a variety of activities that they can interact with. So that would be on the new ways of delivering your instruction. And I don't know if I responded your question, mate. So I'm going to go to Sharon and see if you can come back to that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mariana. Okay, some of the different ways that I use to engage my students beyond the lectures, because I agree with Mariana, when you give them 1 hour, 75-minute lectures, they start falling asleep. You have to break it down. I break mine down into 15 minutes, and I'll point out that YouTube doesn't when you use Camtasia and record it that way, and then you transfer it to YouTube, it really doesn't like things over 15 minutes. So if you can keep it down to 15 minutes. So when I give a lecture on race, it might have race 1, race 2, race 3, race 4, 4 different sections on it, but it breaks it down for the student. One of the things that we're learning here is that you have to kind of think of these online classes as kind of flipped classes, where the lectures are recorded. It is no other ways to teach our students, one of which that I use are discussion boards, okay? It's saying my internet connection's unstable. I'm not sure exactly. So I use these discussion boards where I produce specific questions related to each week's lecture or each day's lecture. So if we're talking about race, have you ever been the recipient of racism? How did you deal with the situation, and what are additional ways that you would deal with it today? How would you change how you reacted? And you give them prompts and they respond. And I have this actually in a blog so the students can see how each of them respond. I also have a discussion board where I put up journal articles. I usually use popular science articles. And once again, I provide prompts. And the students have a variety of prompts to answer to address questions about this article. So you can pull in, so they can pull what they deem as the most important information there. And once again, I allow everybody to see everybody's responses so that it creates a sense of community, and that they can, being able to respond and rate each other's responses. One of the things I'm going to be using this coming semester is something called Flipgrid, where each student can introduce themselves for 30 minutes, from 30 seconds to 90 seconds. You're all frozen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. For 30 to 60 seconds, and they introduce themselves. And so there'll be a board with everybody's picture and saying, why are you taking this class? Are you taking it because it's a core requirement, or are you taking it because it's something that just happens to be of interest to you? And these are just some of the ways that we can try and create community and try and create a course that isn't the same. I'm also going to be using the breakout rooms where the students are working together on various projects. So for my primate behavior class, the students are going to be working together, doing research together using primate cams online. I'm using, as I said, it's all about creativity. It's all about figuring out ways to present the information that one needs. Okay.
Thank you, Sharon. I do see a question or a comment of how discussion boards aren't always effective. What I've seen instructors do sometimes is have 2 different due dates for discussion boards. So for, let's say on Tuesday, the initial discussion post is due, and then by Friday, maybe it's when the replies are due. Because if you don't have the staggered kind of due dates, then everyone waits till the last minute, and then everyone's just typing whatever in there. So when I was teaching online for the first time, I didn't do that, and I got 100 replies at the very end of when the module was supposed to close. But if you stagger the due dates, that helps with participation, with more mindful discussion. So I just wanted to address that. But Dr. Sparks.
Yeah, so I would definitely agree with what's already been said. I mean, my videos are sort of between 5 to 10 minutes, so I'll make several of them and break ideas up. I also found when I went to remote teaching in the middle of the semester of a class that I'd been teaching face-to-face, what that did was it really got me to focus in on the most important concepts. And I realized, well, you know, I was giving a lecture and I'm giving them a lot of side material that I'm not testing them on because it's kind of like, well, this is going to be really interesting to you. And it turns out that most of them are just not really getting that. So it would be much better for them to just focus on, here's the actual core stuff that you need to know to know this topic. I would say that one side effect of making videos that are like really tight and scripted is that I have a script already. And one of the things that I got the best feedback on from my class was that I'll post the videos and I'll post the slides and the script together. And so students would use all of them because some students didn't have the bandwidth to watch the video. And so they could follow up, they could basically read exactly the script that I did and watch the slides. And even the people who watched the video liked to have that on the side while they were watching the video or afterwards. So that was the one thing that I actually got the most comments back on, that they really appreciated that last semester.
Thank you, Dave. And another big thing about what you just said is when you're teaching online, you want to make sure that your course is accessible from Americans with Disability Act. So any videos that you create need to be transcribed and have a script. But like Dave said, it helps students who don't have an accommodation too. So we call this universal design for learning. So definitely check that out if you have time, because that is something that students like and some students need. So let's see the chat here. Okay. Let me go ahead and go on to our next question. And then again, I want to remind you all that you'll have a chance to kind of ask individual questions later, but I do want to touch on assessment, testing, and academic integrity, because that is something that is probably on a lot of your minds. So perhaps Sharon, you would like to shake it up and go first?
Sure. Okay. With testing, we have to rely more on the honor system, which doesn't really exist, than we'd like. There are two ways that two tools that I use. One is Respondus lockdown browser. So that basically locks down the computer so they can't Google anything while they're looking up. Then the other one is also Respondus, but it monitors their gaze. So they can't have a laptop next to them or their notebook right in front of them and looking at that. They're supposed to be just focusing directly on the screen. These are the best ways that we currently have for assessment, for testing. There are systems, and I know the College of Liberal Arts will not let us use them because we have to charge for each exam. There are better systems. I'm hopeful at some point the university will get access to them and they monitor the students more through their cameras. One of the issues that I regularly have with this is that not everybody has functioning cameras, okay? Not everybody has functioning cameras on their computer, and this becomes an issue. You know, I know the university is now allowing financial aid to be used towards the purchase of a computer, but it's still pretty hard to even purchase a webcam at Best Buy. I know they're still out of stock. So, so we're still having some supply chain issues, you might say. In terms of assessment, and I would say that this is probably my biggest weakness. One of the biggest and most important things that we need to do is the development of rubrics, which to tell the students how each thing is being graded and on what basis. This for me is very important for the discussion board. Someone commented earlier to me on a private, on the chat, I think, that they found the students really didn't write anything useful on the discussion board. And but if they're not writing anything useful on the discussion board in response to the prompts you're providing, then they don't get a lot of points. And that's where these rubrics and these 4 assessments come in very, very handy. I know they're available in Canvas. And they're very, to me, it's the hardest part of creating the online class is creating the rubrics. I don't know why, but that's it that it is true for me. I guess I'll pass it on now to my peers. Nate, did I answer your questions?
Yes, that was really good. I can't stress enough that in an online environment, especially an asynchronous online environment, you have to set up students for success. And this means structuring your course like our colleagues have said, but also being very transparent when it comes to expectations. And rubrics can really help that because you might have one idea of what a student response should be, but they're tackling the assignment somewhere else remotely. And they don't have the opportunity in real time to kind of come up to the front of the room and get clarification. So rubrics can really help simplify your life and your job when it comes to teaching.
One more thing before I pass it on to Mariana and David. It's really important. I just want to express that my experience has shown that the students prefer, and I didn't do a study on this or anything, but it's just my experience has shown the students prefer the synchronous classes, the synchronous online classes, because it provides more structure to their day, because they know exactly when to go to class, exactly when they have to watch it by. If you're doing it asynchronously, make it clear the videos are only going to be available during this time period so that they actually watch them and don't wait till the night before the exam. Okay. Mariana?
Good. Great thoughts. Okay, most likely my response to assessment and academic integrity will be very different from David, Dr. Sparks. The reason being because I teach a class in performance studies that demands reflection, the students' reflections on their own performance in life, in the classroom, in the online community, and outside that community. So at the beginning, before designing the class, I was concerned about academic integrity. How do I do an online exam and the students will copy and all of that? But then I asked myself one question, which is, what do I want the students to take or to learn from my class? And the answer to that question is, I want them to have a transformative experience. I want them to have exposure to different viewpoints, to different ways of understanding problems, to develop a flexibility of thought. I want them to grow on that. And I have ways with surveys to measure that growth, right? So, and then when I realized that was my goal, then it really, them being able to access the class or the textbook during an exam, it was not such a big deal. They actually can. All my exams and quizzes and mastery tests are open book, so the students can refer to the content that I develop as if it were a textbook and revisit the ideas and answer the questions. One other element is that in order to minimize the temptation for them to cheat, I also basically create high-stake exams, which are the midterm and the final exam, that are only 20% of their total grade. So it's not like with a midterm exam, they are risking 40% of their grade. It's only 40% for both midterm and final exam, and these are open book. And in order to measure their growth, their reflection, that flexibility of thoughts, alternative thinkings. That I use a lot of minute papers or reflection assignments, journals, pros and cons, exercises. So I want them to be doing higher thinking rather than memorizing the theories of performance studies. I am interested in how they apply the theories of performance studies in their own life. And I am so lucky because I reflect on everything we do as a performance that students become self-conscious. They're reflective of how they are performing as students. Are they completing the task on time? Are they delivering their best in their assignments? So that, I think it plays to my favor, and I get great results at the end. I saw a question in the chat, someone asking any tips on managing a large course. And there are many, but I will say one regarding assessment. And that would be that when I create assignments, some of the assessments are multiple choice, and then eCampus Blackboard takes care of that. But there are others in which I have to grade. And there's 1,000 students in my class, so I do have some helpers, some assistants. But that is a lot of weekly assignments. Once a week, they had to create these assignments, and we have to grade them. So in order to make sure that the students create an assignment, that it is up to my expectations, we all know that it is much easier to grade an A paper than a C paper, right? Because of the amount of feedback that we need to return to the student. So what I do is for each one of these assignments, I model it with a fabulous example. So they have the prompt for the assignment, and they have an example of what it is an A response. And that has proven to be very effective because then students know exactly what I am looking for. And this is in addition to the rubrics that I can use for grading. So that is one tip in terms of managing a large class. I want to minimize the students guessing of what it would be, what I'm expecting or not, and making sure that I can provide every aid for them to complete assignments and assessments gratefully and successfully.
Thank you for sharing. And before we get to Dr. Sparks, there was a comment in the chat. Dr. Stoddard is willing to share her quiz, so I will be getting that, and then I'll be sending that out to you all at the back end of this. Another thing with academic honesty or academic integrity is we've worked with the Aggie Honor Office, and what they found is any assessment, if you have students kind of acknowledge the Aggie Honor Code at the very beginning, before they take the assessment, and then also at the end, it has a positive kind of reinforcement of what the Aggie Honor code is. So will it stamp out all academic integrity issues? Probably not, but it's a little more proactive that way. So sorry for interrupting, Dr. Sparks.
I think my answer to this is actually not going to be that different from Mariana's. So I actually don't give tests in my online class because I started to move away from tests in my face-to-face classes. So I teach mostly things based on mathematical modeling, and so it's more project-based and problem-based and problem sets. And so what I do in my online class, it's the class is about how planets get built. It's the physics and chemistry of planets. And so they get a mathematical model that's already built for them that they have to put some data in, and I generate data that's unique for every student. And I basically set up a program that does that automatically. It just generates a different data set, and I just give them that set. So they're all working on slightly different things. They can't just copy numbers. They have to actually put in their data to get their results. And then I'm asking them to just sort of interpret those results. And with a mathematical model, you put in a number and a number comes out. But that's actually not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in them interpreting that number and trying to realize that there are uncertainties in everything. And can they interpret a range of results in terms of what's useful or what's not useful? And so it's really more about that answer based on, okay, these results indicate that I should be, a planet needs to have a gravity in this range based on the output from the model. So it's pretty unique because their data comes in unique. I mean, the input data is unique to them. I agree that the rubrics are very hard. I haven't gotten to that point yet of trying to generate rubrics for the course. So what I have been doing, because it's still relatively small, is they get to turn in their assignment, each project, each module, they turn it in once and I gotta go through it. And if it's complete, they get a completion grade and they can move on. But but they have an opportunity to kind of perfect it. And so I'll say, you didn't quite get this point. I want you to go back and revisit that. And so that's the way that I'm giving them that feedback now. I haven't scaled that up yet, 2,000 students. So I don't know how well that's, how scalable that is yet. I'm pretty sure from doing it now, I could scale it up to 100 and it would be okay.
Thank you, Dr. Sparks. One thing that I do want to comment on that is when we first went to remote teaching, there was a whole bunch of angst about how do you translate a lab online. And I've read some experts saying that, you can kind of replicate some of that by providing students data like Dr. Sparks was, but also helping engage them in the scientific process. So it's not one-on-one as an in-person lab, but it is one way to kind of have some lab experience within an online course. Now, I want to be mindful of all our time and give you enough chances to kind of ask questions, but I do have one final question for our panelists. And I would ask you to kind of maybe, I'm going to place it in the chat right here. Briefly, what is one challenge that you faced and how did you solve it? How did you address that? And then we'll move into our participant questions.
We've kind of discussed this, but my challenge was based on basically a very stupid thing I did the first time I taught it, which was because the course is asynchronous, and I had been used to teaching a higher level version of this at a graduate level. I said, okay, this is going to be at your own pace, and I'm going to give you here's sort of a map. You ought to really have this module done at this time and this module done at this time, and we'll meet up at 5 modules. When everybody hits 5 modules, let's say by October 5th, we're all going to kind of come together again and see where we are. And by the last week in September, no one had done anything at all. And I had 4 students, and these were good students that I had because I'd kind of selected them as my test case for the first time. And I had 4 of them come to my office independently and say, I'm so sorry. I know I'm the last person to do any of this stuff, but I just haven't been able to get started on it. It's like, no, you're actually the first person. No one, if you turn it in today, you'll be the first one to turn anything in. Yeah, that really didn't work. And so I still wanted to give them freedom because I feel like that's part of the growing process, is this ability to kind of teach yourself to have some structure. But there's hard deadlines now on everything as well. So, I give them sort of a guideline that's like, you will be in good shape all semester if you stick to these dates. But you have to turn them in by these slightly later dates. If you're working on the later dates, you are going to be really, really busy at the end of this semester. So I'm doing that right now this summer. I'm teaching the course over again. So we'll see how that works.
I'm going to tell you what my biggest challenge is. It's called Course Hero and Quizlet. And if you know any other platform in which students post your materials on class or materials from the class online, so that's my challenge too. That means that students have taken the effort to copy the quizzes and tests and even the midterm questions and upload them to these platforms so that they can be public right in there. So when I learned that, I was totally appalled and furious, to be honest. And so, creating an online class is very much like creating a textbook. You are basically doing that. You're writing your text, you're creating your videos, you're captioning, you are creating assessments that are aligned with the material, the content that you're presenting, and that is aligned to the learning objective that you presented at in your syllabus. So there's a lot of thinking, a lot of planning, and all of a sudden your material is out there. So that was very, very challenging. And the solution I am finding right now, and I'm open to your suggestions too, is, well, I realized I need to develop new content and then shuffle it. Maybe, you know, I present this module on semester A and these other modules on semester B, and yet a different set of modules and case studies next semester, so that every time the course is slightly different. And yes, it's a lot of work, but that is what keeps my material alive and not somewhere in a cloud. So that's my biggest challenge.
All right. My biggest challenge was something that Mariana mentioned earlier, and that is community, developing some sort of community amongst the students. And I have learned to deal with this. You know, the students, you know, if you do nothing, the students won't know anybody in their class. They'll have nobody to ask a question to. If you're trying to figure out a formula or what the instructions were, they have no one to ask. So the way I'm dealing with this is I have mandatory check-ins where students whose last name A through E meet with me every first Monday of the month at such and such a time. And then, you know, F through J meet the second Monday. And I also develop more group projects than I normally would, and where it's, you know, where they don't get to choose who they're working with, but they're just assigned. And this also has helped building community. But otherwise, the students feel kind of disconnected from the class. They're just learning the material and they just feel very disconnected. So I really feel it's very important to try and, you know, utilize those breakout rooms, utilize group projects, have mandatory Zoom meetings with everybody to ensure that, you know, and when I taught a course this summer, I had a guy who came every day and he just he was a petroleum engineering student, and we just talked every day, not always about anthropology, but he came and he wanted some socialization. That was really what he wanted. And he knew I would be there at this time every day. And so he came. And so if you make it mandatory, they will come. And much like Dr. Sparks said, you cannot do these classes without that structure. If you don't have the structure, you don't have the deadlines, the students will wait to the last minute. They do procrastinate. Okay.
Thank you, Sharon. I do want to address one question that I saw in the chat before we open it up. Captioning, the university and the system do not have any one place that you can send videos to be captioned. So what I recommend is rev.com. And I think at last check, it was $1 a minute. They outsourced captioning. It's outsourced and it's crowdsourced. So definitely that could be an option. Zoom actually does a pretty good audio transcript. So if you record something in Zoom, it could be a pretty good option there. And also YouTube, the smart captioning isn't 100%, and depending on your discipline, you might need to go in and clean it up a bit more than others, but that is an option there because you can upload a video on YouTube and then it'll put the action or the word with the when you say it. So it's pretty smart. The algorithm's pretty smart, but again, it's not 100%. I do want to transition to give you all some chances to type and or maybe even unmute yourself for questions. So Mariana, Dave, and Sharon are here to kind of answer more questions. We've got about 11, 12 minutes, so please go ahead. I'm opening the floor for discussion.
Hey Nate, we had a question in the chat much earlier on when Sharon was talking about our discussion boards, asking if Sharon could share how she grades or how she reviews in a time-consuming way, less time-consuming way, her discussion boards. So some tips for getting through the content that students are posting more quickly.
Okay, so with my discussion boards, there are always prompts, specific questions that I have asked them to address regarding either an article or just questions that relate back to the material. And I'm, like with I'm a pretty fast reader, but I also keep my classes relatively small. I have nothing like what Mariana is dealing with. I never have anything over 150. But I will admit the grading can kill me. When you have all these different assignments and they're coming in every week, or every Wednesday or every Friday, it's a lot. And I don't have TAs. I would really love the university to provide more TA. I know that's not going to happen. More TAs for those of us who are doing these online classes to assist with grading, because it does get overwhelming. But if you put it through currently through eCampus, and hopefully it'll be just as easy or easier in Canvas, it tells you when things need to be graded, and you can do it, each time a certain number. Every time you get 10 responses, you can then grade those 10. And so it doesn't build up too much. Does that answer that question?
Do each of you associate these different engagement mechanisms with points in your course?
Well, let me see if I can associate my course to that question. So we're talking about engagement, right? And so maybe you are referring to the discussions. There are different ways for students to be engaged with the course. I actually have two types of discussions. I have general discussions for 1,000 students, in which I ask them to begin a thread and then comment to 2 other students. That's pretty much a standard. And then I have other discussions that are only for teams, so that the students don't feel that they are loose in 1,000 students roster. I create small teams of 10 students. And I try to develop interaction so that they get to know each other, they get to answer their questions about the course. And so in those smaller setting discussions, I do exercises such as like introductory exercises, or sometimes even games. Kind of to loosen up the environment. So I may ask, okay, let's play a game when I am most likely to forget, and then complete the sentence. And so they get to know each other. So that sometimes those discussions are not even course related. It just creates some connectivity between those team members. But one thing that I discovered, maybe you too, is that when you try to grade discussions, the system, Blackboard or eCampus, becomes really, really sluggish. And that probably is more true for me because I have 1,000 students. So when I try to grade each one of these discussions, it may take me up to 4 minutes for the content to load down. So I soon realized, okay, this is not possible. So one strategy I am using is that I require a number of 15 discussions throughout the semester, so about once weekly. And instead of grading them one by one, I have the discussions are not set to go into the grade book. They're not for a grade. But I tell the students, this is going to count as your participation grade in the class, which is 10% of your grade. So I have a column that is called participation. And so at the end of the semester, I can recognize patterns of behavior because eCampus would give me that information, and I can recognize the students that have missed many different assignments, so I can check the activity of that student in a board discussion, and very often is very low. So that student will not get 100 points in participation. It will get accordingly to with the number of discussions that participated. And so that is one strategy that I would like to emphasize. Grading board discussions is very difficult, it's sluggish, and so that's why I opt not to link them to the gradebook.
Thank you, Mariana. So we have time for one other question. I saw it in the chat, and this is probably applicable across disciplines. Glenn asks, are there any hints for engaging low motivation students? So maybe some closing remarks from all of our panelists. What are your thoughts on this?
What I did in my class is kind of a specialty class that's based around a particular idea. So the way I set it up was, instead of, well, we're just going to learn about how planets get made, I basically put the course inside of a story. So every student gets a message. You are a science officer on a colonization ship, and you're going to get assignments that are going to help you to find a planet to colonize. And each assignment sort of builds on the next and they get, so there's a little bit of an underground story, and I'll film a couple of small videos that aren't even part of modules that go in between to just kind of continue that story along. So that's just an example of one of a way to just kind of come up with something that kind of make it a little bit more engaging and try to make them want to see what's going to happen and where they're going to go.
Good. Now I was muted, so I'll follow up. I think that to create that engagement with the students, I rely on the content that I present, so that it has to be really, really appealing to students. Whether my case studies, the pictures, the kind of questions, things that the students can relate to their life outside of their learning community, something that is applicable. And I want them to have this curiosity about the next module. So the things that we learn in this module, wow, I learned about rites of passage. And I actually realized, oh, I had a graduation, I had a rite of passage. And so they start seeing their lives with different lenses. And so they become very interested in the next module. It's like reading a good book, you know, that you want to see what is next in the next chapter. So I try to create that feeling with the content that I try to include.
Yeah, I had that issue last week with a book I was reading, American Dirt. I didn't go to sleep that night. How I deal with low motivation students is when I see that students are not meeting the deadlines, so they haven't met the first deadline, I immediately, using eCampus, create a list of those students and send them an email. Hey, I've noticed that you haven't submitted your assignment. I just wanted to check in, see if there's anything I can do. How can I help? What's going on? And just try and keep them engaged, make them know that you're paying attention to them. Is it always successful? No, but sometimes it is. And it's those sometimes that.
Well, I want to thank our panelists. We're formally out of time. Actually, we're ending a minute early, but panelists and myself are available to answer more questions for about another 10 minutes. So we welcome you to stay if you can. But again, thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. And we do plan on doing more panel discussions later on. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But again, thank you for joining us, and please stay safe out there.
I had a couple of questions, Nate, that I read after I was talking, so I couldn't address. But,
okay.
So I don't know if the person that asked those questions, one of them was at the very beginning of our session, and it was about how do you monitor your YouTube channel, or the viewers' attention in a YouTube video. So if you have your YouTube channel where you upload the videos, then there is going to be somewhere, YouTube changes the application all the time. So it's hard to remember, but then there's an analytics, below the YouTube, your YouTube video. So then you can see when and the peak of viewers that you got. In my YouTube channel, I don't enable comments so that students cannot make judgment or comment on the video, and I public them as unlisted. So it's only available for the students in the class, except a couple that I have flying in there for just people to see.
You mentioned discussion board several times, and maybe it's a stupid question, but is it a name of an application, or do you mean a range of discussion boards? I don't know. Everybody mentioned them. Are they on eCampus or somewhere else? Mariana, you talked about discussion boards.
Sure, the discussions board are on eCampus. So
On eCampus.
On eCampus, yeah, I only use eCampus. I don't want to refer students to other applications outside of eCampus generally. So it's all on eCampus. So the discussions, and you can set discussions to be participatory for the entire class, or you can also set them in their group work. So you create groups,
Okay.
and then you can create discussions that are just pertinent to those groups.
And to follow up on that, as we move the LMS transition to Canvas, Canvas has a robust discussion board forum thing too. So it's a discussion forums are a teaching approach, and many different tools are out there to kind of facilitate that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. May I ask a question again? I have a question to Sharon. She mentioned the rubrics that for assessments, and she said that they're available on eCampus. Do you mean you make them available on eCampus? Okay.
You can
Okay,
there's a feature on eCampus that you can use to create a rubric for each of your assignments.
thank you. And then my last question, sorry, is to Katie or to somebody else. I've read the comment that there is an amazing Katie Stoddard test. What is it? I want an amazing Katie Stoddard test.
So it is a academic honesty quiz, and Katie has very graciously offered to share it with me, and I will share it with all the attendees today.
So
Okay,
I could
thank
say
you.
something really quickly about it. So Katie started this some time back, and then she was asked by ITS back when they used to have a faculty development wing, right, to come and give a session on how it works. And everybody wanted to borrow it then. So now it's just become this sensation across campus. That's why we made the Katie. But basically every semester, anytime she encounters or hears from others about ways in which students are discussing or ways in which students may end up cheating and maybe inadvertently didn't even realize it, she adds more questions into this quiz so as to make a rich assessment of their understanding of cheating prior to the semester starting. And so they have to get 100 on this quiz for the syllabus to open up in her course, right? And so they have to go in, and part of it is really understanding all the different ways something is a kind of cheating and what different kinds of cheating they are and all that. And it really informs students of their rights with respect to, and how they will be judged if they went up in an academic dishonesty situation.
So we did have a question from Leroy Dorsey. Maybe the panel could address this. It has to do with early transition to the Canvas LMS. Are you open to that? What are your advices? Because we're not going to stay in eCampus.
Okay, my personal opinion is for faculty who have never done anything really online, just go with Canvas. You're going to have a learning curve, whether it's on Canvas or eCampus. You might as well start. For people who are who have a lot of experience on eCampus, they probably won't have too much difficulty dealing with Canvas because they generally know what to look for and how to maneuver. For those in the middle, you might want to stick to eCampus for another semester. That's my opinion. So
I'm using eCampus this summer, so I'm in the early adopters for summer 2. And I find I still have only learned just enough to do what I need to do now, because basically there was a course that was very helpful, but it came out about 2 weeks before this summer 2 started. So I can tell you already, it just works much better. It's a lot faster. In terms of uploading things and uploading videos, oh, it's 3 or 4 times faster, it seems to me, than
It's
when I
also-
worked on eCampus.
It also has a more intuitive Facebook-like
Yeah.
feel to it.
Yeah,
And so because eCampus was because Blackboard, the version of Blackboard that was eCampus is so much older, it had a more clunky feel and you had to learn all these things. And now this feels much more intuitive. At least that's my sense of it.
yeah.
That is true. In a case like mine, in which I have to transition a very large enrollment course with several sections, I have to be very careful. So I'm working on a grant right now in the month of July. And so then in the month of August, I'm going to see whether I can transition. I know that I cannot export my class because it's so large, from eCampus to Canvas. I've been told that. So I will have to redesign the class from scratch. So that's a decision that I will have to take in August, those first 2 weeks, and see what I can accomplish. And so I'm prepared to either stay on eCampus for 1 more semester until I can prove that Canvas really works for me, or transition to the fall.
Thank you for sharing. We have time for one more question. Anyone else have one last pressing question?
I have a question.
Okay, if I may follow up on what Mariana was talking earlier about your YouTube's videos. And so the question is whether is the best way to do that, or I know in the past we have a media matrix, and I don't know what's going to be in Canvas, how we're going to handle that. Also, Mariana, you mentioned student posting your material in other places. In the YouTube, when you generate events unpublic, what if they share the link with other people? Would that be a concern, or you have a way to get around that?
I don't know if they can do that. I really don't know. I will have to ask a student in my class or one of my TAs if they could share the link. That's a very good question, because I don't make comments able, so then I am not so worried about other people watching my videos. So, it's they're not going to hurt my reputation or anything. So I just make sure to take control over that aspect of my video.
Yeah.
And then another question could be, you mentioned something, Ben, about media metrics. And sometimes I can find videos that I would before find on Media Matrix that are on YouTube. And so then I access that. I try not to link things that are generated or controlled by other channels. So if it is a video that I really want to conserve, it is important for my class, I download the video into my computer and I have it. And so then I upload everything into my channel. So that's how I manage that. But I have not been using Media Matrix for several years now. I don't know if maybe Nate has some ideas on that.
So Media Matrix is going away. I think if you have a hidden YouTube link, anybody with the link can actually access it. So one way to get around that perhaps is maybe have a different link for every semester and keep that behind eCampus wall. So I don't know, there's no foolproof way to kind of deal with that. But again, I mean, it depends on what kind of videos you're putting up there. I mean, it's probably not sensitive material. If you have copyright kind of concerns, then you're probably not going to put it up on YouTube in the first place. But I guess if it was me, if you put anything up on YouTube, assume that it's going to get out somehow or in social media. That's just the default that I always go to. It doesn't solve everything, but
yeah, copyright is one concern if we use figures and things from other books and so on. Another one is if sometimes you want to sequence the viewing of the videos, then there's no control. Well, there may be that I don't know, but otherwise you can control that, schedule that.
So I reached out to the Academic Innovations about Canvas, and they said for now, just load your videos into Canvas. And that seems to be working. I don't know how that's going to work when everybody on the whole campus is doing.
Yeah, then student will be able to download. So you're basically giving the video to them rather than streaming.
Yeah, well, they can do either one, right? You can
Well,
download or
if you
stream it.
If you do the streaming, my understanding is that they won't be able to download the video. Is that correct?
You can, in
Like in
Canvas,
Media
you
Matrix.
can turn something on that says you allow students to download things. And so-
Oh yeah, no, we typically we don't want to do that, right?
Well, good question. We're out of time. I do have a question from Monique. Please definitely follow up with me individually in polling@tamu.edu if you want a further consultation. But again, thank you for staying past our session. I guess have a great day. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me personally, and I will set up something to deal with your context and whatever concerns or questions or scenarios you find yourself in. So thank you, and I guess we're gonna end today. So have a great day.
Thanks much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.